tonight, I want to talk to you about altars of remembrance. So I've mentioned these before at Monday Night Chapel. But basically, in the Bible, when you read about altars, probably the first thing that might pop in your mind is this really ornate, elaborate setup where they would make sacrifices to atone for their sins in the Old Testament. And it's got all these specifications. If you've had an Old Testament class, you're like, what the heck is a cubit? And why is it so specific how the altar's built? These are different. Altars of remembrance is literally a stack of rocks. So you or I could make them today. There's no specific requirement on how high it should be or what rocks you should use. And this altar is not like necessarily a site of worship. It's not necessarily a holy place, but it is actually an altar for you and I as human beings, for people just like us, thousands of years ago, so that they would remember, so they wouldn't forget. These altars are built for the sole purpose of remembering God's goodness and God's faithfulness. I don't know if any of you noticed a theme in our music tonight. The band did a great job, by the way. Can we give them a hand really quick? They did a fantastic job, but they picked songs based on what I told them that tonight we were going to be talking about how good God was and how faithful he was. And that's sort of what these altars of remembrance were. It was this big stack of rocks to remember God was here and God was faithful here. So I'm going to tell you about one of those times in Joshua 4. So basically what's happening is this group of Israelites that has been wandering in the desert. They were enslaved, and then God freed them from this slavery through all these miracles. And then they were wandering around in the desert. And it was a combination of God providing for them in really unique and godlike, ways only he could. And then also a mix of human disappointment. And this isn't what I expected, and we're not getting there fast enough. And I hate the desert, which I get. I grew up in the desert, so I get it. And we always have the same kind of bread. Like manna again, really? So it's this very human story of God reaching in and people still feeling all this disappointment. And so years later, they're finally about to go into this promised land. And they're making their final journey, and they have to cross the Jordan River. Now, no shade to Lake Jessup, but this is not like Lake Jessup, okay? We're not talking like a puddle. This is a river, okay? So I did some stats. I did some research for you guys today. The Jordan River is about 16 yards wide. So that's, pretty wide. I'm not great spatially, but I can tell that's a lot. And it can be anywhere from 50 to 200 feet deep. So it's not like you're carrying your baby across this. You can't touch the bottom. They're not like a water taxi system. They have no way. This seems like this is insurmountable. And then God parts the waters, and they walk across the Jordan River on dry land, completely dry land. And they take the Ark of the Covenant, God's presence, across dry land. And then God tells Joshua, their leader, he says, you need to build an altar of remembrance so that you don't forget. Because you're human, and you're prone to forgetting how good I am, because you get lost in the day-to-day of your life. I want you to build an altar so you don't forget. So they did, in Joshua 4, verses 8 and 9. So the Israelites did as Joshua commanded them. They took 12 stones from the middle of the Jordan, according to the number of the tribes of the Israelites, as the Lord had told Joshua. And they carried them over with them to their camp, where they put them down. Joshua set up the 12 stones that had been in the middle of the Jordan at the spot where the priests who carried the Ark of the Covenants had stood. And they are there to this day. That altar was built so that this group of people would not forget who God was. They had been through a lot with him, and a lot of moments where they felt like he wasn't there, and a lot of moments where his spirit was literally over them like a cloud. They had been through the highs and lows with God. And then they're there, and God says, you need to build this altar so that you don't forget. And I think you and I need to do some altar building when we're looking back at 2020. I understand the temptation to say 2020 is over. I'm never going back there. No one speak of it. That was the year from hell. I don't want to think about it. It was horrible for a myriad of reasons. For some of you, it was loss, anxiety, pain, fear, disconnection, isolation, tension, disunity. There's, a whole slew of adjectives we could use to describe last year. But when we look back at 2020, I think you can actually see God's hand in it if you look in your own life. When I was preparing for this, I was thinking back on some of my stack of rocks moments, as you might say. One of them was when the camp I was supposed to work at got canceled for the summer. That was a huge bummer. But then I still needed an internship. So I actually got to intern with a women's ministry director at my church, and I learned so much. I learned a ton, and it moved me very deeply, that experience, and might have even altered the way I view ministry and what's going to happen after I graduate. That was a moment of God's faithfulness, where in my limited human knowledge, I was like, this is horrible, and this will only ever be horrible. And you can ask my family, I had a really bad attitude about it for 2 months. I was like, this is bad, I'm not getting paid, blah, 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 I'm still home, whatever. And then I look back and I'm like, oh, God's hand was all over that. The same way getting to go home, having to leave school felt horrible. I wasn't able to finish out the year being an RA, which I loved being, and I was like, now I'm back home, I'm so far away from all my friends. And then I realized I'm spending time with my little sisters and my parents that I may never have again. As someone who's about to graduate, I may never get that long stretch of time at home ever again in my life. Lord willing, please, Lord, let me get a job. Yeah, I know, right? But that was a big rock moment for me. That was an altar of remembrance moment, because that was a gift. And the relationship that I developed deeper with both of my sisters is not something I take lightly, and something I recognize is from God, from that experience. In the same way, getting to come back to school, come on, us getting to be here, that goes on our stack of rocks. The fact that we're here in this place, able to be in person or partially in person, is a huge gift. And I could go on and on of a list of altar of remembrance moments from my life, and then just from 2020. There's so many when you turn and look at them. But if you just throw 2020 off, I don't want to think about it anymore. It was such a hard year, and it is. I don't want you to hear me saying, let me come silver line all the clouds in your life, or just put on some rose-colored glasses and everything will be fine. All the things that were horrible are great. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm telling you that in every broken piece of your life from 2020, God's hand is already there. And he was moving, and sometimes when we're so close, we can't see it. So I have 2 things that I hope that you do after tonight, and this is the first one. I want to encourage you to look back on 2020, not as a wasted year, but as a year that was filled with God's goodness. And I want you to put on your detective magnifying glass, I don't know. Because I bet that some of you in here would like to prove me wrong. And so I want you to comb through the year and look to see where God's hand was. Here's some places you could look. In your relationships, in momentous events, in small events, in times of transition in your life, through professors and mentors and people on this campus, maybe through chapels or church services, through your own broken expectations or things not working out the way you hoped, and for the moments that things worked out exactly as you hoped. Some of those things I'm saying feel like opposites, and I hope that shows to you my conviction that his hand is really in everything, not just the good stuff and not just the bad stuff. There is more to 2020, there is more to your 2020 than just pain or anger or whatever negative or difficult emotion you could put there. And so I think throwing it away would be a mistake. So that's my first point. How you look at 2020 matters, and I think it will affect you greatly. So now, going into 2021, what does that mean? In my family, around New Year's Eve, we sit around and we talk about these moments from the year. How was God faithful to you this year? And it's a tradition I deeply cherish, and I always cry like a baby. Sometimes talking about God's faithfulness makes you cry. I don't know what to say. But I've looked forward to it the past 5 years that we've done it. And then in 2020, before maybe life took a turn, I was like, I should really start keeping track of these things before December 30th. Like, I feel kind of lame showing up to this thing we do and I don't have anything to say because I haven't thought about the year at all. I haven't examined my life or looked for God's hand anywhere. It's kind of a different lens to view the world through. So remember when I told you when camp got canceled, I had a really bad attitude for 2 months? That is true. And I think if I had had my lens on to see God's goodness, I could have also seen his hand in it and not just the pain. You know how sometimes you'll like be talking to a friend and you're like, this really stinks. And they're like, yeah, but this. Like you'll be like, I'm so bummed because all my classes are online this semester and I don't even know I'm here and I struggle to learn online. And they're like, yeah, but you get to be in bed all day or whatever. I don't know. That's not really what I'm saying here. I think that God's hand is bigger than you get to be in bed all day. But I think you do get to watch him pull the pieces together of things that feel really scattered and really broken. So I'm going to encourage you to keep your radar up to see where his goodness is. Now, some of you right now are probably feeling a little bit discouraged because if you're anything like me and you're forever an idealist and an optimist, you thought, when we go through 2020, I'm going to walk through the door and then everything will be different. I will be different. Who I am will be different. I will accomplish all my resolutions. I will be a new shiny person and the world around me will be shiny and new. I'll go back to school and all my classes will be in person and they'll also be easy and none of them will have a final. And there will be no political unrest. We will all believe the same things, we won't talk about politics, and no one's going to be scared anymore, and COVID's just going to go away. Some of you think I'm really stupid from this explanation. I didn't really think this, but then in the past few days I've realized I kind of did, because when things start happening and old emotions start coming up, I was like, wait, didn't I leave that in 2020? Didn't I leave my insecurities in 2020 or my relational problems in 2020? I was like, I thought I was a new, shiny and new person. And some of you might be feeling like that right now. Like, oh, I thought we left that in 2020. I didn't think I'd have to deal with that this year. This is already feeling like a heavy year. You've probably seen the memes of like, that was a great few days of 2021. Now let's go on to 2022. We're already over it. I am going to encourage you, and in the same way encourage myself, to fight against that attitude and recognize that in the same way, last year was a really tough year and it was broken and it was hard. So what I'm not telling you is that this year's going to be easier, because I don't know. But I am telling you, regardless of however it goes, God's hand is going to be everywhere. His goodness and his faithfulness is going to be everywhere. And sometimes it takes a bigger perspective view. Like, unfortunately, we can't always know how he's working things out in the moment. There's things in my life that I've been praying for 5 years, and I haven't seen the end of that yet. And I'm so excited, because that's not even going to be a stack of rocks when that comes to fruition. That's going to be a tower of rocks. It's going to be such a testament to his faithfulness. But I'm just going to encourage you to look for his hand and to actively build and mentally revisit your stacks of rocks as you go in 2020. Because when you are living your life in your stacks of rocks, saying, this is who my God is. He is good, he is faithful, he provides for me, and that doesn't mean my life is easy, but he is always present with me, then everything that happens in the world doesn't tilt you over. You're not so shaken by the wind that anything that happens, I'm freaked out now, I don't know what to do. The world is ending, I just want this to all be over. When you live your life surrounded by stacks of rocks, you recognize who God is and you ruminate on that. Some of you are looking for your next disappointment. You're looking to see who's going to let you down next, what situation is not going to be fulfilled the way you hoped it would, what thing is going to break your expectations or be hard. And I'm telling you, if you're looking for that, I guarantee you will find it, because you and I live in a very broken world. But I'm also telling you, if you're looking to see God's hand in your life and his goodness, I guarantee you will find it. I really do believe that he is actively working and that he uses you and I for goodness in other people's lives. He uses us for things bigger than ourselves, and he is also a very loving God. He takes care of us. So I want to encourage you. I'm going to invite the worship team back up right now. But I want to encourage you to be writing down moments from this year that God is faithful to you. And we are going to check back in on Mondays. Sometimes I'm going to ask you to talk to the person next to you about a recent way that God's been faithful to you. Because I want you to be able to ruminate on it and soak in it as you go throughout this next year. And that doesn't mean that life is easy, but when you recognize God's hand everywhere, you see that you're not walking through it alone, and that he is going to make something beautiful out of a time and a moment in your own personal life that might feel really messy. He is always going to make something beautiful out of it. So I would like to pray over you guys tonight. Can we pray together? Lord, I just want to thank you that we can be here, and I want to thank you for all these beautiful faces in the room tonight, and that we're here safely. I just want to thank you for the way you moved in 2020, and for the ways that you were faithful and present, the ways that you intervened. God, you provided for us in 2020. You gave us more than we ever could have dreamed of. You protected us in 2020 from things that we might not even see right now, from opportunities and people and situations that weren't right for us. And you, God, you provided us with your pleasure, just these little moments of joy that you give to us because you love us so deeply. And so I just want to thank you for that, and I just pray you would give us eyes to see it. When we view the last year as simply broken, I pray you'd redeem that picture in our eyes and help us to see your hand everywhere, because it is. I pray we would see you in 2020, because how we look at 2020 matters. And as we go into 2021, I pray you'd raise our awareness to see you everywhere, because you are everywhere. And I pray that we would walk confidently, knowing that you are near us, you are with us. And I pray that we would be expectant. Let us be people of faith and expectancy that you are going to do something amazing next. That we're leaning over the rails, can't wait to see what's going to happen next with this God that always provides, always protects. You are good and you are faithful. If you're here tonight and this just sounds too good to be true, like what is this God that she says is protecting me and providing for me and with me? I just want to tell you, like we sang tonight, his goodness is running after you. He is pursuing you with his whole heart. He loves you deeply. And he wants you to know him so you can experience that love, which is what you were created to do. God, I just thank you for tonight, and I thank you for this group of people, and I pray that we would just see your face in chapel this semester. Bring us closer to you, make us more like you, and help us see you everywhere. We love you. In Jesus' name, amen.